Okay. Hi, everyone. It's Carla and Joe Policastro from Cycle CPA. And today we have Jason Cupp. Hi, Jason. So excited to have you on.
Hey guys, super excited to be here with you too.
Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah. And where are you joining us from?
I am in warm and balmy Kansas City, Missouri. It's going to be 95 today on May 10th. I can't even imagine why in springtime, why it's going to be 95 degrees outside.
Yeah. That's
Unbelievable. Yeah, no,
crazy.
in New York, we're still kind of battling, between some of the colder days still. So that's,
Yeah.
it sounds like a pretty nice place to be. 95 degrees.
No, it was,
Sure.
I literally think on a Monday or Tuesday morning, there was sleet like 2 or 3 weeks ago. So the weather is very bizarre right now. I think the weather is bizarre across the country,
Yes.
especially for people in our industry. There's lots of bizarre weather that's really affecting people's business and their business models right now. And so I think that it is kind of a relevant, interesting 95 degrees in Kansas City when it was sleeting 3 weeks ago. So kind of bizarre.
Yeah.
For
You
sure.
know,
Yes.
and Jason, it is funny how within this industry, how much it does affect, businesses and, kind of, times when they may have to, pivot and, as the weather, gets colder or warmer, stuff like that. But, Jason, I know that, you're very involved within the industry and, um, you know, and I'd love to, start if you can please share your background, within the industry.
Yeah, absolutely. So I like a lot of people started mowing lawns out of my parents' garage when I was 12 years old. I think that's a story that exists with a lot of people that are involved in the green industry, whether it be landscaping or lawn care or mowing. And then over time, built that business up to be a partner in a relatively large multi-million-dollar company, focusing on residential and commercial maintenance, snow removal. We even had some distribution. So we sold materials to our competitors and also residential design build. So my focus was always in residential maintenance, residential construction, residential design build, but definitely know a lot about, the commercial side of the business and also snow removal. And then my second life was 17 years ago or so, 17, 18 years ago, I started doing consulting and building some content for the landscape industry. It was kind of by accident because I had friends in the industry that was asking me questions about some interesting things that we were doing in our business at the time. And I would share it with them and they started to ask me more questions. And I'm like, I think there might be a business model here. So while I was running my landscape company, I started a consulting company in 2006 and started to help people with marketing plans and hiring and team building and financial stuff. And that kind of morphed and evolved into what it is today. That's what I do full time. I've been doing it full time for 14 years. Crazy when I think about that. When I rewind the clock and I go 14 years. So for the last 14 years, I've been helping companies across a lot of different disciplines, not just landscaping. I've got a whole slew of dentists that I work with and physicians that I work with, people that are selling non-industry related products on the internet, on Amazon and on Shopify, really working with a whole bunch of different companies. But 70 to 80% of what we do today is with service industry companies, people that service homes or properties in landscaping, lawn care, house cleaning, fence repair, pool contractors, kind of all of those different services. That accounts for a large part of what we do today.
Awesome. Wow. So you have years of experience, and as you know, Jason, right now, there are a lot of issues within this industry and just retaining and finding employees. What is your current experience with that, with the clients that you're working with, and how are they, combating these issues?
Yeah, it's a really good question, as I think you both know, but maybe people who don't know me or us and our company, we have a whole HR consulting side of our business. So we're doing a lot of hiring for people, mostly in the management side of things, but our clients are asking us all the time about the labor force. So here's the data that I would have kind of as of right now. The labor force is a little easier to find today on May 10th than it was a year ago. But it's still very much a quick to market hiring process. When someone who has the qualities that you need comes and needs a job, wants a job, you almost need to hire them on the spot. I was telling somebody earlier this morning in a private call that 3 years ago, it used to be that you could send somebody through a hiring process and have them fill out all these forms and maybe multiple interviews, or have them work on a crew for a day to see how hard they work. Those days are almost over right now. So the thing that we're telling our clients on the labor side is, number one, it is a full-time job. You constantly have to be looking to strengthen the bench. Think about a coach. A coach in a sports team is always trying to strengthen their bench. They're trying to get the best players that they possibly can, and that is no different in this industry. When labor is scarce, which it is now, and it has been for the last many years, it's been this way for a long time. Let's not blame the labor shortage on COVID. It just made it a little bit worse, okay? What I'm always telling people is that they constantly have to be just working on hiring. That means placing ads, replacing ads, constantly in a recruiting mindset. And this is what I tell people, and I know I'm still on number one. Most business owners spend so much time, effort, energy, budget, strategy to acquire the clients, and they just kind of expect their workers to walk in the door. They don't have that same structure and strategy and budget to acquire their workers. And I got to tell you, a client without someone to complete the work in this industry is a client you probably shouldn't have, because you're going to send the wrong message. So the first one is, it's a full-time job. You have to constantly be recruiting. The second one is quick to market. As I said, you got to be willing to hire quickly, and you got to be willing to not go through the same process as you did once before. The third thing is, and this is something that I have been almost preaching, soapboxing, yelling from, up in front of crowds, not yelling because I don't yell, but I mean, really trying to be a message, is that if we expect a labor hire, someone that's in the field, somebody boots on the ground, to fill out a big, long online application, submit a resume, sit down at a computer, do all of these different things that I know a lot of companies are kind of trying to insert in to make a better hire, those folks oftentimes don't have access to a computer. They need a job today. They don't want to sit and build a resume. You got to get into the mind of the applicant. You got to figure out what's the best way for them to feel that they need to be hired, rather than the way that you feel that they need to be hired. We're making applicants jump through, not we, my company, but we as an industry are making applicants jump through a hiring process that is not intuitive to them. They might not be, you all sit in front of computers all day long. I sit in front of a computer all day long. Our field employees, or people that are boots on the ground, which is the lifeblood of the company, aren't doing that. So to expect them to jump through a bunch of hoops is a little bit wrong in terms of the eye of the applicant. The fourth thing is that you got to build up really great, positive, amazing culture in your business. There's lots of evidence that those team members are sticking around or applying at companies that they know they're working for a great owner, a great management team. If it's a larger company, they really like to be valued. They like to have that positive reinforcement. They like to work for a good person, right? There's no space whatsoever. I know that I run really, really, really hard from people who are arrogant and people who are dictators and people who yell and scream at their employees. That's oil and water with me. Probably not going to be able to help those folks. But the folks who are out there running a really great business and doing an awesome job, really building up a positive culture, not only are retaining their employees, they are attracting employees because they've got that reputational analysis. And the fifth thing is that you got to pay the right wage. I think that one of the things that COVID, and I've been coined to saying this across multiple platforms, one of the things that COVID did for this industry, which I think is a plus, and if anybody's watching this and it hasn't been excuse me, in their business yet, they really need to dial it back. And that is, we right-size pricing. We got our pricing, those that did the price increase. And I'm not talking about the recent price increase that should have occurred because of all of the inflation. I'm talking about charging the right number to clients that they should have in the beginning. But when you right-size the pricing, you also need to right-size the pay to your team. You needed to not expect to charge maybe 10% more to your clients and not give your employees part of that profit that you instituted basically on a price increase. You got to pay the people who are making the golden goose lay the eggs every single day. 5 things, a lot,
Wow.
but I've seen it happen successfully in hundreds of companies across the country in the service sector.
No, that's great stuff, Jason. I'm over here taking notes, and just everything from speed to the applicant, and maybe soft skills involved, and really looking at it from what it sounds like, Jason, as if hiring and recruiting is your bottleneck, treat it like that. Allocate resources to solve that problem.
Yep.
So that's an awesome approach there. And with all the companies that you work with, I'm super interested to, especially in this day of age, how are some of your clients dealing with implementing some softwares or technology to help them,
On the hiring side or just
anywhere within the business? Yeah.
Yeah. There's so many awesome software platforms that are out there. I think that one of the big differences that I have noticed between the companies who are scaling and growing is having data available to be able to analyze where their business is in a variety of different metrics. And oftentimes that comes from a software solution. As you know, a lot of clients that I know are using Service Autopilot. There's some that are using Aspire. I like both of those for what they are. There's some people that are using other software platforms that are out there that maybe I'm not as familiar with. So I don't want to sit there and endorse anything because I have no dogs in that fight. I can just tell you what people that I, get on the phone with and help them with their business stuff, what they're using. And those are probably the two that percolate up the most. But I think that the industry went through a transformation maybe 5 to 7 years ago where contractors really recognized and realized that they needed to rely on technology more than they had in the past. I'll be very honest. We ran our business based on a lot of Excel spreadsheets, and this was also been out of the contracting business for 14 years now. So that was a totally different world back then. We ran our business based on Excel spreadsheets, and we used some design software. And that design software had an estimating platform in it for our design build. But other than that, everything was, our schedules were built on Excel. Route density was done, by putting pins on a map and figuring out where clients were. I mean, that's the way it used to be done. Now there's software solutions that can help aggregate all of that. I'm a big fan of collection of data. You need to have data to run your business, but I am allergic to the constant analysis of data unless that data needs to be analyzed. I think that one of the biggest challenges that business owners have is they collect and they analyze a lot of data. They can sit in front of a computer all day long, all night long, and look at every single micro data. And they build these amazing, awesome reports, but that's about where it stops. So for me, one of the things that I have really tried to do is to get above the clouds and understand how that data that you collect through a software platform can be instrumental in making business decisions. And that's a big, long conversation that we probably don't have the time or bandwidth to talk about today. I'd be happy to talk about it again, because I think that it can help in when to recruit a new salesperson or operations person. How do you set up a bonus program? Whether or not you're as efficient as you should be, whether or not you can scale your business. Should you buy that piece of equipment or truck? Should you launch another crew? All of those items can be answered in financial analysis, which we've talked privately about when we've gotten caught up. I know you guys are doing great work to help people understand their numbers better. We also do that, as you very well know. And I think that when people can make a decision based on numbers, that starts with data. And that data has to come typically out of some software system that analyzes the day-to-day activity of the business, as well as the global financials of the business, that integrates all their financial transactions so that they can really make good decisions. I'm here to tell you that every single business decision in business can be made if you have good financial data. That's really, I firmly believe that. I've yet to be stumped. Maybe one of your watchers will stump me. But if you got good data, folks like the three of us can help make a really good decision on whether or not they should proceed with something that maybe is a risk, that isn't a risk at all, because the data supports that it needs to occur.
Yeah, I agree. And also historical data helps in making decisions for the day-to-day business, transactions. The more historical data that you have, the more that you can analyze these trends. I think the biggest issue would be just interpreting that data for business owners.
Yeah, I mean, I think that one of the things that I've learned over my embarrassing 35 years in this industry, wow, I'm over 35 years. I just aged myself, didn't I?
No, you're good.
Is that
I'm
most
doing the
people-
calculation over here now.
Is that, and maybe you have a different census, but my census tells me that there are a lot of amazing people in this industry who are awesome at their trade. They are great at their trade. They're incredible in terms of the quality of the product that they provide, and understanding equipment and construction and the way to get things done. But they might not understand their numbers. They might not understand how to price things. They might not understand what I call pricing elasticity. They might not understand the difference between a P&L and a balance sheet. I will admit, I don't know that I've ever said this, especially on a recorded line where we're live, but I will admit that when I was 14 years old and I was mowing lawns, I did not know the difference between a statement and an invoice. Laugh all you want, but I didn't know the difference between it. I was billing my clients in a statement, and the only way that I knew the difference between a statement and an invoice was that one of my clients was a financial planner, and he sat me down at his kitchen table and he goes, "Now, Jason," he literally, 14 years old, 15 years old. "Now, Jason, let me tell you the difference between a statement and an invoice." If he wouldn't have told me that way back when, I wouldn't have known the difference. And in research then, when I was 14, 15 years old, that was in the 80s. You couldn't just get on the internet and go Google what's a statement, what's an invoice. And so I think that one of the things, and the reason why I'm so excited about getting to know you all better, is because you're out there educating people about the difference between all these accounting terms, which in a lot of people's minds, that emoji that you can do of like the mind exploding because it's like way too much data. I think some people look at their numbers in that regard, and then they just go back to what they know, which is doing a great trade.
Yeah.
And my drive and promise, and has been for many, many, many years, was to tell whoever would listen how they can understand their numbers better and make more profit, pay off debt, create a lifestyle or a family situation, or whatever that end result is. And a lot of that just really, really, really comes from knowing that data and knowing how to interpret it and knowing what it tells you, and know the difference between a P&L and a balance sheet, and long-term debt and short-term debt, and the impact of borrowing money on a credit card, or the cash flow issues, or whatever it might be, cost of goods sold versus overhead, and debt schedules, and all these things that I know that the two of you understand, and we do too, but a lot of people in business don't. And I think that's our professional kind of almost obligation to share that with as many people as will listen, so that they can have better data to be able to run their businesses by. And that excites me, because when people understand it, they make better decisions just by understanding it alone, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And they don't become a statistic, of having to close their doors, because of cash flow problems, or something like that. So it's it's kind of one of those things that once you see it, and then it's something that you're really bought into. And but As for the businesses that you work with, or what you're seeing within the industry, how are you seeing businesses, or what are businesses doing now to really separate themselves from their competitors?
Well, it's what we just talked about. Technology is definitely one of them. I also go back, to what I said in the hiring. I mean, building up a great culture is another one. I don't want to go back down that road, but I would say that the at least in my world might be just one little slice of the pie. Those that are really scaling just understand where they're making money. That is really it. I know it maybe seems so elementary, but one of the things that we really try to do through a lot of the ways that we teach our clientele is we just really like to tell them where they're making their money. I'll give you an example. I was on a call recently, and I've been working with this client to split out what his costs are by all of his different services. And we recently recognized, because he dove into the data again, just like what we've been talking about, dove into the data and realized that his fertilization and weed control was making him a 74% gross profit or 26% COGS. And that was also one of his lower revenue points. And I said, you got to throw the kitchen sink at acquiring clients in fertilization and weed control. It's also a place where he has scalability. He has the ability to add clients within that. And as you both know, and maybe so clean this up if this doesn't make sense. When we go and we build a division, we've got kind of fixed overhead that's attached to that division. A lot of that gross profit, not all of it, because we got fuel and work comp, client acquisition, those types of things. A lot of that gross profit drops right to the bottom line. So to get way above the clouds, to people who are watching or listening, if you sell $100,000 in your most profitable service, and those numbers are true, where you got 26% COGS or 74% gross profit, of those $100,000, you're going to make $74,000 ish, 75,000 round up in gross profit. You have a little bit of overhead like fuel and work comp. So you're making $65,000, maybe $60,000 that's dropping directly to the bottom line. I know of no one in this industry or any other industry that wouldn't want to sell 100,000 and have 60,000 drop into their profitability or cash flow analysis. I just know nobody. $60,000 is a lot of money. And so for me, the difference is people who just know their numbers, when they know that they're trending too high in debt, which we see a lot. We didn't pre-plan any of this, or I didn't, maybe you guys did, but I can tell you this, and anybody who will give me a voice, I'll tell you this. If your business doesn't print positive cash flow, there's something fundamentally wrong with it, and you need to figure that out, because it's not going to just magically fix itself. That's the first thing that I would say. The second thing that I would say is never, ever, ever borrow money from Fundbox, On Deck Financial, any of these companies that are out there that charge this exorbitant interest rate to fund businesses. That they are like payday loan companies for businesses, and all you're doing is solving a problem with debt, and you're going to get into the debt trap, and you're going to be a statistic at that point. And so for me, it's really understanding where you're making money. It's really understanding what your overhead costs are, what your efficiency ratings are. And it all, I know, maybe I'm a little bit of a broken record. It all goes back to numbers. That's the thing that I'm seeing that is really delivering some success. I'll tell you another thing that I'm seeing, and this is a new, not new in terms of time, probably the last 3 years, is when people figure out what they are really good at and what they're really good at making money at, they delete at sometimes the distraction of other services that is a distraction or a different sales process or a different cost continuum, and they focus completely on that. I have clients who have, in this space, landscaping space, that have said, all we want to do is landscape projects, and we want them to be $5,000 to $20,000, and that's it. We're not doing bigger projects. We're not doing smaller projects. We're not doing maintenance. We're not doing hardscapes. All we're doing is softscapes, and that's where we're going to be. I have some clients that say, all we're going to do is fertilization and weed control. Some have said, all we're going to do is residential mowing. To really find out what you're really awesome at, and that you make good money at, and then focus all of your messaging and investment and overhead structure into that, is not a bad idea. Now, that has nothing to say about the awesome multidiscipline companies that are out there that are crushing it, but sometimes 1 or 2 services is better than 10.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
those are the things that I'm seeing. Those are the things that I'm seeing.
Yeah, simplify to scale. It makes sense. And no, that's all great stuff, Jason. You know, and I think even going back to, you know, with that one client you were talking about, how, you know, you were able to segment their one you know, department out, and really see that that's very profitable. I think just knowing that, just that knowledge is unbelievably valuable for
Totally.
companies. You
Yeah.
know, because you don't want to put yourself in a position where you're multiplying, you know, an unprofitable division and scaling it, not even knowing that it's, you know, not profitable.
Totally agree. I probably about a month ago, I lose track of time due to busyness, but probably about a month ago, I actually flew with a colleague to meet a client face to face in their office, and not in the industry, but in a service industry, but not in the landscaping industry. And when we walked in the door, the owner and their team flat out said, our numbers are a mess. We make all of our money in one division. We don't make enough money in this other division, so on and so forth. I mean, a lot of assumptions as to what was going on.
Mhm.
And when we got into QuickBooks and we started looking at the data, we got into their software, we really started to look at revenue data and costs and all that kind of stuff. It was actually the opposite of what they thought. Number one, their numbers were a lot better than they thought they were. They had good reconciliations. They were following accrual-based accounting. They had most of their numbers in all the right places in the chart of accounts. We were able to really look at the data and look at it well. But the division that they had been focusing all their marketing on and building the team up and all their logistics was actually costing them about 15 to 18 points higher than the division that they thought was unprofitable. It was actually a complete flip of what they thought. So sometimes that gut instinct, intuition that maybe clients are seeing isn't exactly what reality is when you start plugging real data into it and really sifting into the numbers and really looking at what the reality is. And so walking out of that meeting, they flipped their marketing and their logistics efforts to say, all right, let's get what isn't as profitable. Let's go through a price increase. Let's work on efficiencies. But more importantly, let's pivot our marketing and our networking and our opportunity into the service that we know we're making a lot of money on. That's a game changer for that business. And that one conversation and understanding the data probably over the course of the next 12 months will make them an additional $100,000 in profit just by knowing that and pivoting the direction in which they were currently moving. And so all of that, I think, is super important for people to just dive in, find the numbers, understand them, and then make decisions based off of it.
Yeah.
And we also see, you know, the other side of that too, where sometimes business owners, especially maybe if they're starting a new division or if there's multiple service lines, sometimes they don't want to see what the numbers are going to say.
Yep.
You know, and they have a feeling that maybe it isn't as good as it should be. You know, maybe they think that it's doing well, but in reality, when you allocate some of your overhead expenses and admin costs to it, it's actually not doing as well. You know, and you know, so I think you know, from what you're making pretty clear here, Jason, is that, you know, clear data and taking action based off that data is, you know, really how you see companies you know, excelling.
110%. And not to say that gut feeling and that instinct that I think, you know, so many entrepreneurs at least have isn't right, but boy, to get confirmation when you look at the data and realize that your gut instinct is right, or to realize that you were, you know, driving in the wrong direction.
Yeah.
You know, it's just like, you know, I mean, the driving is a good analogy. You know, you can sit there and feel like I'm a maps guy. Like when I get to a new city that I haven't been to, I always have to open a map and I have to look. But so I sometimes still get kind of twist it around. And imagine if I think west is east and east is west, just because I've never been there before and I start driving the wrong direction. Sometimes you get so far down the road that you got to, it's hard to find a U-turn and turn around, and then you got to backtrack, and all that costs time, money, effort, being on time to an appointment or whatever it might be. And so to be pointing the map in the right direction in terms of business, I think is super important.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. No, and I think you brought up a lot of good points here, Jason, just with everything from HR that you do all the way to financial analysis. I think it's great. But if anybody wants to reach out to you, ask you any questions, what's the best place that they can do that?
Great question. Our website is easy. I've got a team behind me, so it's not just me. We've got a team of 5 people behind me that, that helps, but jasoncupp.com. Cupp is CUPP, JSONCUPP.com. I also, do a lot of, like you guys, content on Facebook. And so you can send me a private message via Facebook. I'm usually pretty good, not right now because I'm a little bit behind, but usually pretty good at replying to that. So, or email jason@jasoncupp.com. I mean, we're here. This is what we do every single day. Me and my team is help people with all of these concepts and theories, and happy to help anybody or answer any questions. Put a comment in on this video, tag me in it, and I'll try my best to answer anything specifically that people might have.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Jason. I enjoyed the interview and hope to have you back on here soon. All right.
Absolutely. Thank you, guys. Have a great rest of the week. Be good.
Thank you, Jason.
Yep. Take care.